That's what's so exciting about making documentaries. A, because when you wake up in the morning and you get your gear together and you go somewhere, like, you don't know what you're gonna get. When you get something, it feels like such a discovery.
Today's guest, it's Max Joseph from the show Catfish. When I heard that Max was working on a docuseries about happiness, I was just excited to watch it as a fan. And as it turns out, it's awesome.
You have these 6 neurotransmitters. And the thing is that you can't fill one up so much that it then fills up the others.
Happiness is a problematic word because we think that's like laughing and having fun or something.
We're just chasing dopamine and serotonin. And we're ignoring cannabinoids, oxytocin, opioids.
We are attracted to philosophy and religion because we think it'll help us with our problems. And we don't see that the fundamental message of all of the schools is to stop caring about yourself and to care about other people.
The philosophies of happiness. And what I actually kind of didn't fully realize or appreciate is that
So I was trying to think about where we met. We met in an airport, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Security at LAX.
Yep. No. We were through security. I think we were. I came up to you. I think
so.
We were in like a terminal at LAX, and I saw you, and I think I had just seen you do a Q&A with Robert Greene.
Yes.
Over laws of human nature. In LA.
Yes.
And then I recognized you, and I came up to you, and I was like, I was like, dealing with my own anxieties about certain things. I came up to you, and I just was like, Ryan, like, and then I proceeded to try to like get you to give me advice on various different things.
Well, it's weird because like you recognize people, and then because I obviously recognized you, and then you have the very distinctive hair, and then but you're like, I didn't feel like I had a good in. I was going to be like, oh, because we have a mutual friend, Casey Neistat, and I was like, we both know the same person is never a good one because you get that all the time. Like, do you know what I mean? You get that, and then you realize you realize 90% of the time when people say that, they don't actually know the other person. It's just a lie. And then you're just like, so whatever. I didn't have a good in. But then you had just seen me, which I hadn't expected.
Yeah. And I know that you had worked a lot with Robert.
Yes. And
I'd interviewed Robert before, and I'd read a lot of his books.
I think you had just done your documentary, your bookstore documentary. Because I think you were like, hey, I want to show you this thing that's coming out. And I don't think did I tell you I was literally in the middle of opening a bookstore?
I think you did. Like, that's like, there was already an overlap in like the love of books and bookstores in particular.
That thing crushed, didn't it? That documentary was huge, right?
Yeah. It did really well.
I loved it, of course. What would you say your favorite bookstores are?
Cook and Book in Brussels.
Okay.
Which is like the Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of bookstores. Like, there are 9 different rooms, and they're almost like planets. Yeah. And each one is completely different than the other, like, based on what the theme of that room is. There's the cookbook room, and then there's the children's room is kind of an obvious one, but then there's like the graphic novel room, there's the art bookstore room, there's the like literature room, there's the English bookstore room because it's in Brussels, and they're each so well like set designed, like production designed. Then I would say that's my favorite one.
Have you been to the last bookstore?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's great. Yeah, I shot that too. It didn't make it into the documentary.
That's what I was going to ask, because I didn't remember it being in there.
It is in there in like shots. Like, there's shots of it in there, but I didn't like do a full-on like profile on it. And I will.
Book Soup is for sale?
I do know that.
I was looking at it.
It's too expensive.
I was like, well, it's too expensive for me in the sense that I would then own a business in Los Angeles, which I don't want to do. Like this one works for me for me and my wife, because it's like also our sort of headquarters / like home base. So like, if you can make it, which it's funny, I was talking to who was then the CEO of Book Soup when I was thinking about doing this, and she was like, The number one thing is it has to have multiple uses. She's like, if you're just trying to make it work as a bookstore, that's really, really hard. And the math isn't that great. But if you're using it for other stuff, so it's like a podcast studio and it's an office and we do e-commerce for Daily Stoic out of here, like then the bookstore is sort of subsidized by other things in the way that it's subsidized even on Amazon, right? Like Amazon is selling refrigerators. That's where the money actually is, or whatever, batteries. And then books are like this extra thing. So the math on just doing a bookstore is very hard.
I can imagine. I mean, it's also LA. So like how many people are actually reading?
Yeah. I can only imagine the rent on a building on Sunset Boulevard. What I would really like to buy, have you ever been to the bookstore behind Book Soup?
Yes. The first edition store? Yes. That's a very special store. And how they're not
the same is insane to me. It seems like that, like if they were the same, it would be...
It's kind of like the bookstore equivalent of the Buffalo Wild Wings Pizza Hut combo.
But they're not. They're totally separate businesses. Yes. Right. There's one in New Orleans that I love that's like that. It's called Faulkner House Books. And it's like one of those old, tall New Orleans style, like 3-story buildings that Faulkner lived in when he was writing his first novel. And so the woman who owns it, or the family who owns it, they live upstairs, and then downstairs is a bookstore, mostly sort of Southern writer, Faulkner themed. And then they just sell lots of like super rare Faulkner first editions, which probably pays for, they sell one of those a month or whatever, it pays for everything. That's a really cool one. I like that one.
I mean, like I need to make a second edition of that.
You should.
Yeah, I should, because there are plenty, because after you make one of those, everyone starts sending you.
You didn't even know about the ones you didn't know about.
No, right. Yeah. And now, of course, there are all those amazing ones in Asia that like, you see on Instagram. That now I just need to do a whole like Asia trip just for the bookstore tour.
There's one in Manhattan that I haven't been to that I keep meaning to go, but like something you could only have in New York, I guess. It's basically only Churchill books. And you're like, you wouldn't imagine being such a prolific writer and historical figure that there'd be enough books about you to fill an entire bookstore. That's pretty insane.
I need to see that. I just moved to New York. I just moved back to New York.
Oh, really? Why?
Yeah. I'd been in LA for 20 years, and I grew up in New York.
Yeah.
So a lot of my family and friends are there, and so there are multiple reasons I wanted to move back. But just on a creative level, I just wanted more different stimulation, different cultural input. But on the topic of bookstores, in the doc, there's this hotel in Portugal called the Literary Man Hotel. And it like all the walls of the hotel look like this. And every room, like there's like a chamber inside. It's like a reading room, but there are no windows.
In the hotel or in the chamber?
In the chamber. Okay. And it's like it looks like it's out of a children's book about like magical libraries. I'm thinking of that Erin Morgenstern book, which I'm reading right now, called The Starless Sea. I don't know if you've ever, but it's like, it's very magical. And so it's not a bookstore in itself, but as far as like book lovers go and people who love libraries and bookstores, like it's kind of a fantasy, like fantasy camp.
Did you actually solve your reading problem, which inspired the doc?
I did.
Because for people that know, you're inspired by Tim Urban, who also lives here, but he had this sort of chart of like how many books you're going to read in your life. And that there's sort of this ticking clock on it, right? We think we're going to read stuff later, or we'll read more at some other point in our life, but you probably won't. And so the urgency of kind of meditating on your mortality does create an urgency about reading. And I think also an urgency about quitting books that suck, which we should talk about. But it did it for you. Like you're back on track.
I'm back on track. I was an English major in school. So like I used to read a lot, but I started reading late as a kid. Like my parents weren't like, you're not going to watch TV, you're going to read books, which I kind of wish they had done.
Yeah.
But then maybe I wouldn't end up making movies. So I guess there's a trade-off. I've gotten back in the habit, And that habit is generally like 30 minutes in the morning, like first thing when I wake up. Yeah.
Instead of the phone?
Definitely. Yeah. My day, it's so kind of binary. Like if I start the day looking at my phone, my day goes this way.
Yes.
And it's not in a great direction. And if I start the day reading, and it's reading fiction, fiction in the morning, nonfiction in the evening.
Okay.
Because I'm just like transitioning out of like the dream state, my brain is super like plasticky and like, I don't know, it's so easy to just get into it, like whatever I'm reading. And that's why fiction in the morning, especially because when it's the opposite of, let's say, reading like the news first thing. Because like all of a sudden, like when you look at your phone, you read the news, like you're in that kind of transitional state, and then you're having all these kind of reactive emotions, and that reverberates like you know, through the rest of your morning, and then your day starts off completely influenced by that. But if you start fiction, it's distance, you're distanced enough from it that your emotional reactions, even if they're strong because you're further down in a book, like, you know, on some level that it's not real. Yes. And that it's happening in
well, it's like, are you going to start the day by playing Russian roulette, right? Like I better hope nobody sent me any frustrating texts while I was sleeping. No work crises arose while I was sleeping, so that's my email inbox. Nobody said anything stupid or awful on social media. You know, never going to happen. And then no negative news events in the world. The chances of all those lining up are so extremely low. Or just even like looking at your calendar, right? You're like, oh, fuck, I forgot all the things I committed to 2 weeks ago for today, right? So the chance that you're going to wake up and you're going to grab the phone and it's going to be a thing that sets a positive course for the day is essentially zero. So it's actually worse than Russian roulette. Like the odds are definitely not in your favor. It's like there's 5 rounds in the chamber. And yeah, it's just why play that game? Why it's better, I think, you get up a tad early, because if you're getting up late, then you don't have the luxury of like putting things off. But if you can get up early, and I try to keep like a 30-minute to 1 hour buffer before I go into that
phone mode. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't remember the last time there was something I saw that couldn't have waited that long.
Yeah, it's what really sucks is like when you're like, sometimes I'm doing like a commercial or a project with people in the UK, and in LA it was actually worse because you're the last to wake up. Right. So, and if you're working with people in New York or LA, like there are a lot of emails and texts that are like urgent, and you just
lunchtime for them.
You like wake up right into the day. It's very stressful. It's like, you have like a very early Zoom or something. And you have to have read something to prepare for it, like an email or something. But being in that fiction like mind space in the morning is really, I don't know, it really sets the day out. And talking about buffers, it does create like this kind of like shock absorption buffer that you go through the day. I mean, it kind of fits with your Stoic thing where it's just like, you know, you're able to kind of encounter bumps in the road and all those things, and without being like jolted too hard and finding yourself in a super reactive like state. And I kind of feel like the more you read in the morning, that stuff, and then in the evening, like I find it really hard to read fiction at night because I'm so, I don't know. You've
been living in the real world all day.
I've been living.
Now you have to go to Mars or something.
Right. It's hard to transition out of it, and I'm by the end of the day, I'm like very self-centered. Not in a selfish way, but I'm like I've been dealing with things all day, and so I find it helpful to read nonfiction that is like serving some sort of value, whether it's like helping me out that's the thing I'm most interested in at the end of the day, are things that are going to help me solve my problems.
The cognitive load of fiction is you have to enter and assume all the facts of a not real world, right? Especially if you're reading like science fiction or something that's even different than just fictional characters. But you have to enter this world, and there is a certain mental load to that I find is hard to do when you're tired or fried, unless it's amazing, right? Like when you're reading the greatest novel ever, you can probably pick it up at any time. But when it's
if you're already like in it, it's easier.
Yes.
But if you're just like still getting into it,
I'm like, wait, what? How does that work? Or who was that person? You're like, just like at the end of the day, it's hard to remember all the people you talk to, or who your wife's telling you some story, and you're like, wait, who are we talking about again?
Right.
But to do that in a novel, you got to remember all these people, right, and all these things that happen. I do. The only thing I have heard about fiction at night, which is it's good to read before bed because
your dreams,
it puts you to sleep. Because it is because of that, right? Like it's slower than like you're reading some self-help book before bed. You're like, it's getting your mind firing, which is the opposite of what you want to be happening before bed.
At the same time, though, like if I'm reading, like I recently reread How to Stop Worrying. It's by the guy who did How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. Yeah. So it's How to Stop Worrying, which is great. And like each chapter has like a little gem. And like you read it and you get this little gem and you're like, and then you and then it's nice, and then you feel like a little relieved, you feel like a little catharsis, and then you can go to sleep.
Yeah, see, for me, when I'm reading too much stuff at night, it's like, oh, I'm going to use this, right? So it's like getting the work brain going again. Right. So I try not to do that too much before bed. I don't remember you talking in the documentary, maybe you did, but one of my favorite reading rules is about quitting books. You give every book 100 pages minus your age. And so like
I never heard that broken down to such a precise formula.
And it's funny because my grandmother's 94, 95, and so like I'm like, give this book like 5 pages. Like if it's not good, you got to move on. But because I like the idea of thinking about like, okay, we only have so many books we're going to read in our life. We only have so much time. Obviously, there are sometimes you really struggle through a book and it pays off halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, or you're glad you read it afterwards. But most of the time, no. Like if it's not doing it early, it's never going to do it. And it's not because it's challenging you. Your assumptions that you're not liking it. You're not liking it because it's not making the argument well, or it's not entertaining, or the writing is poor. But I do think part of the trying to read a lot in the short amount of time that you have in life, what I find with people who are good at reading is they quit books and they don't feel guilty about quitting books that suck.
Well, I definitely don't feel guilty. We do talk about it a little bit in the doc, but it's interesting because I like reading, and I know I'm alone on this, but I love reading on like my iPad, like because I can make notes, I can highlight things and then export them, and like save them in a way that like I can't do that like when I'm, and also I can hold it with one hand in bed, like in every angle. Whereas, my
wife has like this Kindle on this stand, and then she has a clicker. So she doesn't have to use her hands to even on the device.
Fair enough. When I look though at like a lot of the books on my iPad, I can see that like a lot of them, like I've stopped reading them around 30%.
Yes.
But sometimes years after I've started them, I will circle back.
Sure.
And then I find that around like 35%, 36%, maybe 40% is like when I like actually enter the world of the book. But I need to get over that like 30% hump. Like the beginning's always fun. It's like meeting someone. It's like meeting, a girl for the first time. You're like, oh, first 3 dates are great. And then you kind of hit like a little bit of a lull, and like there's like, it gets a little slow, and you're like, I don't really know if I want to stay in this. Like, and start looking around some more. And then, then you get over like 40% and you're like, I'm in.
Right.
I'm into the end. But the worst is when you're reading a book and you're building a case against the book.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't know. You haven't let go. You haven't like surrendered to it.
Am I not liking this because I'm closed-minded? I have these assumptions, or am I not liking this because it's garbage and the person is wrong? That is a tension, right? Because you want to, like, if you're only reading books that you agree with, you're not really getting the benefit of reading, which is learning new things. But at the same time, like, I think about it, one, as an author, like, my job is to make the book readable and interesting. It's like, oh, you just didn't get the movie. No, the movie, your job is to make me get the movie, right? Like, if it's boring, it's the filmmaker's fault, I feel like. And the same is true with books. But then, you know, is this not working because there's something fundamentally faulty about what they're saying, or about their point of view or whatever? And should you keep reading? I read a book the other day where there was something I saw in the acknowledgments that ruined it for me, like right there. Like, the person had said something about their husband who I knew something about. And it just like, it wasn't like this Seinfeldian, like super nitpicky thing, but it was like this person was like thanking their husband who they subsequently got divorced from, who got in all this trouble. And I was like, wait, so like, you didn't even see this in like your own. I was just like, the case for me started like literally one sentence.
No, and what's worse than like going page by page and like not just having the author's voice in your head, but your own like kind of reactive, like cynical voice. Like, that's the voice you don't want when you're reading. Mm-hmm. And then if that tension is there the whole time, like, you're just digging yourself into a hole.
Yes. And you might as well read something you're actually going to get something out of, instead of this thing that their fault or your fault, your head fucked about, and it's not going to do anything.
You want to surrender.
Yes.
And when you surrender, you want to make sure that you're surrendering to someone with like who's worthy to surrender to.
It's true.
Like, you want to know that you're in good hands of someone with more wisdom, or someone who's like, this is going to take me somewhere. And until you surrender, and that works with movies too.
Yes.
You know, movies, though, it's a smaller time commitment.
Yes.
But still, I'll walk out of a movie. If I'm watching a movie and like I'm building a case against it while I'm watching it, and like I'll ask myself, though, maybe I'm being closed-minded. Maybe I came in with a judgment, try to put it away. But if I'm just building a case over the course of a movie, I'll walk out.
Yeah, well, that's the sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, should you keep doing a thing just because you paid for the ticket? So should you take the ride? No, you paid for it either way. Do you want to pay for it and waste 2 hours of your life, or would you rather pay for it and only waste 1 hour of your life? It's hard for us to do that math. You're like, I'm already 500 pages in. You know, like, you're reading these huge books. It's like, that's probably too many. You know, but it's hard to quit because we feel like that's an act of ill discipline, when actually the discipline is to quit.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends, and it is kind of case by case. Like, if you're reading a book that you know, like, is in the canon. I was an English lit major, and so there were plenty of books where I'm reading, I'm like, this is real, this is work.
Yes.
This is work.
But why did people appreciate it for so long? What am I supposed to get out of this?
Right.
And I often, on those, I go, okay, it's not Shakespeare here that's the problem, it's me. So what do I need to read or ask questions? How do I need to figure out how to get from the thing? Now, sometimes the emperor doesn't have any clothes, and there's a few classics that definitely suck. But like, I think in those ones I go, okay, I need to like, I'm not enjoying it because I'm not understanding what's happening. That's really what's the problem. And so I'm going to go like, I don't believe in spoilers when it comes to books. So I'll figure out what's happening, and then I can appreciate what's being said as I've understood what's happened.
I mean, that's exactly why I was an English major, because I always I love history too, but history is like, I can read a history book and like it's more cut and dry. I don't need someone to unpack. I don't need someone to unpack a history book with me.
Sure.
There's so much, literature is dense, and some of it's really hard to understand. If you have a great teacher, and I had some great English, I mean, I think they just turned me on in general. And like, I had a great teacher who taught us Moby Dick. Mm-hmm. And just like, if I had just read Moby Dick on my own, no way.
Sure.
no way would I understand. I mean, I still don't understand like a lot of it. It's so dense and there's so many ways to read things. There's so many layers. To have a great guide, a Sherpa kind of taking you up that mountain, like that's what really, I don't know. I recommend that to anybody. But like you said, if you're reading something from the canon and you're doing it on your own, it is like kind of climbing a mountain on your own without a guide. Like you do need, and now with the internet, you can go on and
watch
kind
a video about it, read the review. Like I try to go find like good reviews about a thing. Like, yeah, you're reading Moby Dick, like chances are some new edition has come out, you know, in the last 150 years. So the New York Times book review will have like some in-depth article about Moby Dick and what it means and why it matters, and just read that. And then you're like, okay, now I know what the fuck's happening. Right. And now I have my bearings. I can understand all the things the people are saying and why they matter.
Here, you need just someone to like give you a little push. Yes. And like, oh, these are the themes. Yes. Oh, I see. These are the big themes we're talking about. This is what he's like. This is what he's dipping his toe into. This is the whale kind of represents this, that, and the other.
We're realizing too, like the person that you're reading this article or this teacher, they haven't read the book one time. They've read the book like 50 times. Right. And so they missed what you missed the first time too. That's the point. It's you want someone, if you want a guide climbing a mountain, you don't just get another person who's climbing the mountain at the same time. You get someone who's climbed this mountain hundreds and hundreds of times, and they know the things that are true on some days and not on other days. You know, they know it at a level that you're not gonna get on your own, and you want to save yourself having to read it 50 times.
It is crazy how like whether it's watching a movie twice. Like I've often just said to myself, like, you've never seen a movie unless you've seen it twice. Yeah. Like, and you probably have never really read a book unless you've read it twice. But I've read very few books twice.
And how many books have you read, like 10 times or 20 times?
Most of those books I've read multiple times are kind of more nonfiction books, or like I've read Robert Greene's books a couple times. Like I've read Mastery.
Oh, it's an incredible.
I've read Mastery, like I think I read it like a bunch, like 2 years ago. Like I read it like I listened to it as I was running. Like I went through the whole thing a couple times.
Actually, I would say you can't read a book 2 times, right? You can never read the same book more than once, right? Because it's a different book. You're different. And so the idea that you're evolving with it, and then also if you can get to a point where you don't have to start on page 1 with something, right? Like there's books that you can dip in and dip out of. Those are amazing.
Like I need like a pick me up.
Yeah. Or like I know there's a chapter about this in this book, and I'm just going to go grab that. And I think Robert's books are amazing in that they're sort of designed to do that. They're this modular thing.
They're like they're Talmudic.
Yes.
Like they're so dense. Mm-hmm. And then they're the stories. Like and then they're the keys. And then and it's like, reading it for the first time, what's going in is only like a small fraction.
And you're only open to hearing what you needed that time you were reading it. And then you're like, oh, you know, he was talking to someone who's going through it at this other level or in this different way. You know, you think about how strange it is that we have like teenagers read these like what did me as a 17-year-old need to get from The Great Gatsby? Like, this is a book about like a man who's trying to go back in time, written by a guy who's in his 30s, sort of deciding what direction to take his life. Like, there's almost nothing a 16-year-old can get about that. And so, like, it's a book you have to read, not when you're older, but like when you reread it when you're older, you go, oh, I didn't even understand all these things that I was missing.
Totally.
And that's something
you're
special
like,
about
I don't even remember that this happened in this book. Yes. And that was like the most, like that's the most beautiful, like poetic, instructive part of this. I don't even remember this scene.
Yes. There's a Joan Didion quote where she says, you know, writing is a hostile act. You're trying to get someone to see something the way you see it. And so that's my point too about like quitting bad books. Like, it is a hard thing to convince someone of something. And sometimes a person can't convince you because the argument is stupid. Sometimes they can't do it because they don't have the chops to do it. But I think it's wrong to just think of books as this like a book isn't a painting where someone just made this thing. Not that that's what painters are doing, but like a book is an argument, right? Or it's a world, and it has to be this self-contained thing, and it either does the job or it doesn't. And I think, unfortunately, like a lot of books don't do the job.
But the job is different for each book. Like you said, like it's such a multiplicity of goals that a book can have. Like you said, like it could be a world, it could be a like someone setting out to kind of map out a message but you want there to be a tension between what the person has set out to do and what they're doing. If there's no tension because the thing they set out to do is simple and they're just rehashing it, you get that too. You're like, I get it.
Yes.
Like you made like some books should only be one chapter.
Although sometimes people, I'll see this in reviews of my books, which you're not supposed to look at, but people will go like, oh, it got repetitive, towards the end, or it repeats himself. And there's a narcissism that we all have when we read something. We go, it's repetitive, and it's like it's repetitive to you because you got it.
Right.
And so what's hard about a book project and in a movie or a documentary is understanding that the audience is different and understands things at different levels or brings a different level of knowledge to it, right? And so some people you have to beat over the head with it. Some people got it in the first 5 seconds,
right?
And most people are somewhere in between there,
right?
And so it's like I've had to take it. It's like, okay, that's a compliment. They told me I won earlier than I expected to win, and
it's a great way to read your reviews.
So like if I listen to that advice, then there's going to be a whole bunch of other people on the next one that go, he didn't make his point. I didn't get it, and so like you have to understand that like. That's what's tough about art is it has to be something to you first and foremost,
right?
And then it has to be something to a multiplicity of people who are at different places and phases and familiarities and cultures and all this stuff, and that to really do something for a lot of people is a magical thing.
Like I feel like in the Robert Greene example, like he's setting out to map out this like very big ambitious idea, and like he's reaching really far, and like a good book, and like Moby Dick, same thing. Like Melville is like he's grasping at something, and the book is the space between the grasping and the goal.
Yes.
And if the grasp is not like, if that tension is too, if it's too slack, or if it's like too facile, like he can just grab it, then the book is not as like, it doesn't have the charge that it needs to have. So you want there to be like some sort of gap between the grasping and the thing, which is what's keeping the writer or the artist like going. Yeah,
if they're not challenging themselves, there's not going to have the energy. But also, if they're biting off more than they can chew, it's not going to work either. So they're always biting off. That's the danger.
They're always trying to bite off more than they can chew, and whether they kind of get it,
do they chew it at all?
Right. It's kind of condescending if they are not biting off enough.
Yes.
And it's like, it's also like very frustrating if they're biting off so much that it's just like, what do you do? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
like
you don't get it.
Right.
You don't get what you're talking. Like, I'm not sure you wrapped your head around it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for incepting in my mind, like you're like this vomitus of ideas that you weren't able to organize.
Well, I often tell like a lot of authors will do books like, they'll be like the paradox of X, or the book would be called like the whatever paradox, or and I'll go like, I've said this to multiple people who've done books like that. I go, here's the problem. What you're telling me from the outset is that you didn't figure it out. You're like, it's complicated, right? Like you're like, it's a little of this and a little of that. And it's like, I already knew that. You got to find the part of this that you do understand. Or like conversely, when someone will write a biography and they're like, I kind of love him and I kind of hate him. And you're like, Okay, but like if you haven't cracked the puzzle on insert, like I'm not saying that everyone is all good or all bad, but if you haven't made up your mind about like, I need you to tell me why you hate this person, having spent years of your life with them, or you love this person. Like either the good outweighs the bad and that's why you wrote the book, or the bad does not outweigh the good and that's why you wrote the book. But if you've got this sort of, like sometimes academics will just have this kind of middling take on the
survey.
person. Yeah, it's a survey course of all the things that happened to them. And this is why it's become a cliche. But if you haven't figured out the rosebud thing that unlocks why this person is either worth understanding or what the story you decided to tell about this person that unlocked them for you personally, then again, it's not going to have the energy.
Well, that gets into documentary. That's very relevant in terms of documentaries.
Yes.
Because unlike a narrative feature where you basically, where you're going to end, you've already mapped it out.
You're telling the story of Firefest or something.
Well, no, I'm talking about in a narrative feature where it's scripted.
Oh, okay.
It's
sure.
like you have a script, you know what happens at the end. And then it's like, it's not painting by numbers because obviously like an actor brings something to it. There are ways that you're going to interpret the material and you're kind of like kneading the dough and but you know where you're going for the most part. With a documentary, different documentaries are different, but like you start with a question. Mm-hmm. What is this about? Yeah. Or what happened here?
Sure.
And if it's a good documentary, I think like the filmmaker doesn't know.
Yeah.
And so you're taking a gamble.
Yes. You're like,
by the time I'm done with this, which should, for financial and time management reasons, needs to be like, by 3 years into this, I'm gambling that I will get to that rosebud
well, there's
thing.
The expression of like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down. You better hope, or a parachute. You better have assembled something towards the end, or it's just going to go with a thud because you're like, what am I watching? I see there's lots of footage here and you put lots of time, but what are you telling me?
And that's what's so exciting about making documentaries. Because when you wake up in the morning and you get your gear together and you go somewhere, like you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah. But you kind of, it's like digging, like you kind of like, you can kind of change the direction of the dig based on what you find. And like, then when you get something, it feels like such a discovery. And that's not the same with scripted filmmaking. It's like, oh, you get a great performance that really brought the material to life. But it's not the same as like, oh my God, that moment. Like,
didn't plan told me something that I didn't know, or I didn't know about them, or that they'd never shown before.
And I was filming it.
Yes.
And it's like I captured something while it was happening that is not just left an impression on me, but I now know that I can, if I represent that or bring it into the work, that it will impact other people too.
Yeah, I think like your new one, it's like if the end of it, you're like, happiness is complicated. Nobody knows, I'm like, what am I watching? Right. At the same time, if it's like, here are the 7 steps to happiness, you're also full of shit. Right. Because it is more complicated than that. And so there is this, you go and it's like science. You have a hypothesis or you have a sense of where you're going. But at the end of the day, I don't want to hear about the experiments that didn't work out. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this moment where you unlock it. Maybe it's not what you expect, but you unlock, here's what I have to say about this thing. And that is a magical feeling. Like for me, it's like, obviously you sit down to write a book, you have to know where you're going. If you think you're going to figure it out while you're doing it, you're going to get hopelessly lost. But there is a moment where maybe like 2/3 of the way in, like I'm probably roughly half on the book I'm doing right now. And so you're doing it every day, but you're not sure it's working. And there is a moment where it clicks and you go, okay, I am doing it. Like this is going somewhere. It's come together. I could still crash and die and that the I don't know how to fly a plane, but like there's wings here or whatever, however you want to do the metaphor. It started to come together to a degree where you're like, okay, I didn't just waste 2 years of my life. That's a magical feeling.
Right. But that's like that's the exhilaration of being kind of making these pieces of art that are kind of art plus instruction, which is like you are jumping off the cliff and you're like, am I going to pull this one?
Yeah.
Am I going to pull this off? Like, you don't know. You might not. But you have a feeling you will.
So the what is it? The 7. You have this great graphic in the happiness doc of like the 7. What are they?
Six neurotransmitter.
What are they? Are those beakers?
They're test tubes.
Yeah, you illustrated this test tubes. But I've got to imagine that was a moment where you're like, oh, that's kind of the narrative device of the concept, and that's your way. You got this guy on camera, and he probably explained to you a theory using a metaphor, and you were like, oh, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, people who, when you're interviewing specialists or experts, like they're coming at you with a bunch of metaphors.
Yes.
They've done all the hard work. I mean, like I am not an expert. I'm a tourist.
Sure.
And I get to, I mean, that's what I love about making doc stuff is I get to kind of immerse in a particular topic for, a couple years and meet people and kind of cherry pick, ideas and stuff. And then I get to synthesize them without having to assume the pretension of being an expert myself.
Yes.
And so I'm both like shielded from like, well, they're not my theories. I'm just explaining it. There's a kind of Promethean or Robin Hood feeling of I'm stealing from the rich to give to the poor.
But there's this moment where you're like, oh, this is my way in. Like when I'm like, usually when I'm doing my sort of research, I'm like, here are the themes that I want to talk about. And it's when I come up with the story that captures that thing that's really exciting. And then it's extra exciting when I go, I think there's, like I'm vaguely remembering, or I have this sense like this person from what I know of like their history would be good. And then you get into the material and you're like, holy fuck, it's like way better than I thought. Like it perfectly makes my argument. And I bet you had that where you're like, I want to interview this person. And there's this whole process by which you're getting them to agree, you're scheduling, they're sitting down, you're blocking the shots. Then you start to ask the questions, and then there's this warm up. And then there's the moment where they tell you more than you could have hoped to hear from them. That's probably what keeps you going, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that happened on Bookstores. And in fact, it kind of happens with all of these. Like the front section of each of these docs I've been making, like the Bookstore one, I was in Seattle for a wedding, and I went to Elliott Bay Bookstore. And I had my camera and my tripod because I knew my plan was to make just a 2-minute film about why I like bookstores.
Yeah.
That was it.
Sure.
It was not ambitious. And I was because I was so overloaded. Anytime I go into a bookstore, even your bookstore right now, I'm like, I have this urge to capture like what's so beautiful about it. And so I got that footage, and then I went home and I started editing it. And as I'm editing it together, I'm like, this is flat. Like, where is this going? Like, this is nothing.
Yeah.
This is just literally just like shots of bookstores. But what am I getting? Like, what is the feeling? Like, why did I feel the need to do this? And then I started to unpack it's kind of the overwhelming anxiety of of seeing all this beautiful stuff. I'm looking at these books behind you.
There's good shit in there.
Yeah. And there's this like urge, there's both an excitement and an anxiety an excitement to consume it all, but an anxiety that I won't be able to. And then I was like, what is that about? And then I was like, oh my God, this is not a 2-minute video.
Yeah.
This is a much deeper, bigger exploration. And that, that front part of these videos is kind of like where I start.
Yeah, sure.
And then, with this happiness thing, I've been blessed in a lot of ways. I have a lot of things that I should be happy about every day that should fill my cup, so to speak, the metaphorical cup. And that cup seems to have a hole at the bottom of it. Right? Like I have an amazing wife. I have a great dog. I've been able to, eke out a career doing what I love, and it's not enough. It's not enough.
Sure.
And I want more.
And the fundamental human drive, which is that we always think if I get this thing, then I'll be good. And it's never been good for anyone. Although we do suspect for other people, they are like, oh, it's because I'm just not at the right level. And then it's good.
Right.
If I could be like so-and-so, I would be good.
Right. If these three things happened, then I could rest easy at night and feel satisfied in my soul. But what you learn by just talking to people who have climbed those mountains is like they're no less restless than they were before.
Yes.
That drive is constant.
Yes.
And so that hole that's and I say the hole in my heart, like what's that about?
Right.
And so that was kind of the starting point. And I also know that there's something there because I talk to friends and stuff about it, and they're like, I feel the same way.
And no one's like, I'm so happy.
Right.
Everything's working.
I'm so satisfied. Life is so great. I just walk. Right. And anyone who does say that, I'm kind of like, you're full of shit.
When you read history, you're like, why were these great people so miserable? And was the misery the driver of the greatness? You know, there's a Stefan Zweig quote. He's this novelist who also wrote these great biographies. And I think he was talking about Magellan. And he said, he also wrote this book called The World of Yesterday, which is about Europe right before World War I breaks out. But he goes, never in the history of humanity has a conqueror been surfeited by conquests. Like never has the conqueror gotten there and been like, yes, I knew it would do it for you. It just doesn't happen. The thing moves.
Right.
And I thought that was very striking about the intro. I was curious too, because you have been very successful in what you do, but I think we share this, like you have this thing that you think is going to be your big thing. You have that movie. You think it's going to do everything for you. And then it doesn't hit the way that you want it to hit. And then you have this choice. We all have this choice where you go, okay, if it had done what I wanted, then I would have been happy. Or you can go, oh, it was never going to give me what I needed. And I think conversely, people who do get it still face the same choice, right? Because it doesn't do it for them. And they go, it's because I need to do more, or it's because it was never going to do it for me. So life is constantly like trying to get us to have this understanding that you're never going to fix internal stuff with external accomplishments. And then we have this magical ability to just like misread what the lesson is and then just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I do feel like if that movie had done well, I certainly would have had an easier mental health journey for the last 9 years, but maybe not. Like we acclimate to good things really quickly, and we dwell on negative things for a long time, right? And somewhere in there is like the lessons of grit and resilience and all that stuff. Like don't dwell on your failures so much that like you can't move on or try again, but don't ignore them entirely so that you don't study what went wrong.
And you could have had that exact experience that the guy in your doc has. I'm forgetting the doctor's name.
Axel Bouchon.
Yeah, where he's like calls his wife to tell her the huge news, and she's like, "I'm out." Like, by the way, I'm leaving you.
That happened. I mean, like I was making Catfish and doing making We Are Your Friends at the same time, and it was intense. Yes. Like I had no time for anything. In fact, we were on the road. I was editing on my laptop. We would shoot during the day, and then I would edit at night. I would sleep for like 3 hours, and then we would shoot again. And I was like coming apart at the seams. And then I finally finished the movie, and I was like, oh, here it is, deliverance. Finally, I can sleep, redemption. And, my wife was pretty upset that like I had basically like not been around.
These are finite wells that you're tapping.
Right.
Yes.
And then the movie didn't do well.
Yeah.
So it's like that didn't pay off.
Yeah.
And then it was like,
now I need you to support me as I pick up the pieces of my broken psyche. Just like, what? No, you used it all up over here.
Right. Yeah. I used up all my credits. And then you're like, well, what really matters, right? Like we are walking around. And I think we are in America in particular, like we're caught in a bind, right? We're smart enough and we're educated enough and we consume enough information to know that there is like a better way to be living our lives.
Yeah.
But we're also so immersed in the waters. We've grown up in the waters of achievement and
we're competing with other people.
A competition and accomplishment-based self-worth.
Yes.
Which is kind of the fundamental problem that I have and that I imagine a lot of people have. It's like, yes, we are the sum of our accomplishments.
Sure.
And like, yeah, you go to school for like, you know, you go through 20 years of schooling or something to get you to like, okay, then you graduate and it's like time to achieve, baby.
Yeah.
Like now you're in it now. We gave you everything
what kind
you
of car
need.
do you drive?
Yeah.
Like how big's your house, you know?
And like, or it's not, it doesn't have to be monetary.
Right.
It could just be like, you know, how many books have you published on this subject? How well are you respected in your field? Like your field might not be a well-paying field. And in fact, I found that the like documentary filmmaking is not a particularly well-paying field, but it makes the people in it like that much more competitive. Like the laurels are like people will stab you in the back even harder and faster. Yeah, because the pie is so much smaller. And so it breeds.
And it's still relative, right? It's like, look, if you play in the NBA, you're measuring who is the best in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars. But if you're in academia, you're measuring it in terms of thousands of dollars or how many assistants you have, but you're still measuring, right? And you're still going, yeah, they don't have a 5,000 or 50,000 square foot mansion, but you still go, well, their apartment is nicer than mine, you know, or whatever. They drive a nice, you're still, humans inevitably find some way to turn everything into a status competition. That's what we do.
Well, so my wife is Brazilian, and so I go down to Brazil a lot, and I go to parties and get-togethers, and no one is talking about work.
Yeah.
No one's asking me,
sure,
what do you do? Oh, I mean, like, I'll bring it up because that's all I have to talk about.
That's I don't have personality.
I don't have anything else. I'm kind of dying for someone to be like, tell me about that last project you did. I want to.
It's like I have to compete here as a regular person. You know, like fuck.
I got nothing.
Yeah, right.
I don't have any hobbies. I've optimized my whole life around achieving in this one. I mean, like I'm not even a sports fan. Like that would at least give me something to talk about beyond.
You got to really get into coffee or something.
Right.
Yes.
I know. Like I need I started surfing, but by the way, I suck.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not very good. So you don't want to bring up things that you're not that good at, but it's nice to be in a culture that doesn't like where your value is not just tied to like, well, what did you do in the last 2 years? And how relevant are you? And it's just the inherent value of just you as a human being. It's like, I just like you.
Yeah.
Like you give off a good vibe and you ask good questions and I like talking to you. Like that is so, and I'm not saying Brazil has it all figured out. Sure. They got their own set of problems.
You could, but you don't.
No, and it's easy to romanticize a place that you visit once in a while. But different places have different sets of problems. And our problem in the US, and unfortunately because we are such an exporter of culture, like we are
it's the only thing we do.
Yeah. We are marketing and exporting our problem everywhere.
Yeah, the thing where you're often like the thing that you're most unbalanced about is the thing you have the excess of, right? You're exporting. It's like I thought the most powerful part of the metaphor that you have in the thing, which really stopped me cold because I think it's a tendency we have. So like I don't think it's a controversial argument, right? To go like, okay, there's these different buckets or different beakers or whatever you want to call it, you have to fill up to be happy, right? And obviously career and success is one, pleasure is one, whatever. But you go, there's no evidence that shows that a surplus in one can fill up the other or compensate for the other. So what tends to happen is you're good or successful at the thing you have the abundance of, right? And so you just do more and more and more of that, trying to fill these other buckets or holes, and it's not only not working, it can actually suck the joy and meaning out of the singular thing, right? So the workaholic just is alienating the family And so they're just, well, work's the only thing that makes sense. So they're working and they're sucking the joy out of the work.
Their strength.
Yeah, as they're empty everywhere else.
I can like describe the,
Sure.
do you want?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're essentially, and this is not like, I didn't come up with this science. I'm reporting on it, but basically there are 6 neurotransmitters that represent our like positive reward systems. All of our, they represent in different combinations, they represent all of our positive emotions. And they evolved in a specific order, right?
Yeah.
There's dopamine, which is like allowed us to be motivated to find food.
Yeah.
That came first. Then there's testosterone, which helped with, reproduction.
Yeah.
Right. So you need dopamine for finding food. You need testosterone to reproduce. Then there was serotonin, which is like recognition and it's pride, which helps in reproduction, like.
And you're the best food gatherer.
Right. Yes. It's like, someone thinks I'm the best or like so you're being chosen or you're choosing someone else based on how good they are at a certain thing.
Yeah.
So that's serotonin. It's recognition. Then there's oxytocin, which is you're having these kids. You're having and you need to basically be able to.
It's like family and connection.
You need to take care of them. Yeah. You need to love them in order to. The human children need 18 years before their, brains are formed. And so we need a drug or a, neurotransmitter to help us take care of our kids. Then there's cannabinoids. So whereas oxytocin is like family love, cannabinoids is friendship love. And that then, that comes hand in hand with community, with cooperation, working together. Without cannabinoids, that's not possible. And then there's opioids. Opioids is like pleasure and gratitude. So you have these 6 neurotransmitters. I think I covered all 6.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you can't fill one up so much that it then fills up the others. So this even goes to like if you're taking an SSRI.
Yeah.
Like, I take.
You still got to exercise. You got to go out and see human beings.
You can't take so much Zoloft that it fills up your 6 buckets.
Right.
Zoloft is only going to fill up your serotonin bucket.
Yeah.
And sure, it might fill all the way up to the top, but you still have other buckets you need to fill.
Yes.
Same thing with making money and success. Money and success are tied to dopamine and serotonin.
Right. So
we're kind of like stuck. At least I am, but I think a lot of people are stuck in this, like, we're just chasing dopamine and serotonin, and we're ignoring cannabinoids, oxytocin, opioids, and testosterone. If you're a sex addict, then you're just hammering on testosterone.
Right.
And you're ignoring the others. So, it's the key. The key is balance, right?
Yes.
Which is such a cliche, but at least like you can see what the things you need to balance are.
Well, so the Stoic virtues are courage, justice, wisdom, and then the middle one is temperance. So it's funny, like when I talk to people about it, I usually render that as discipline because that's like what people want more of, right? It's the more palatable way into but temperance, the idea of balance, the right amount of things. The other word for this is sophrosine, like the knowledge of what the right amount of a thing is, like what are the things worth having and then what's the right amount of those things. That's really like the key balance. We don't spend a lot of time talking with people about it, teaching people about it. And the problem is, as you said, a lot of our heroes are fundamentally like imbalanced in those things. That's why they became heroic at that thing. You don't become the greatest football player in the world or the richest person in the world because you're balanced out. No, you decided, fuck the other neurotransmitters. This is the only one that matters. And then people look at that and they go, oh, I'll do what that person's doing. And you're just mimicking a fundamentally unbalanced person.
Right. The further we get in history, the more imbalanced they get. There was a moment in like the Renaissance, right, where they were looking back at the Stoics, right, where Leonardo is all of them at once. That is, he's an artist and a scientist.
Yeah.
And there is something to that for sure. But what I actually found interesting, and it's in the third episode. So each episode.
Is that the one I saw?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are different. The first episode that came out is the science of happiness, neuroscience. Then there's an episode on the philosophies of happiness. And what I actually like kind of didn't fully realize or appreciate is that so much of our conceptions of well-being and happiness, and even Maslow's pyramid and all hierarchy and all that stuff. He never said pyramid, even though we show it as a pyramid. He actually never said that. It's all individual based, right? Even Aristotle's, treatise, it's all about how to become the best person.
Right.
And it gives short shrift, or at least we don't put the emphasis on the serving of the community, how much our happiness is actually tied up in being one of a group of people.
Yes.
And I think especially here in the West, and certainly in America, with our foundational myth of the rugged individual, like there's this, I'm going to become self-sufficient, right? Or self-reliance, Emerson, right? I'm going to become so self-reliant and self-sufficient that I can say, fuck you to everyone else. I can do my thing. I'm going to become self-actualized. And then I'm going to stand on top of that mountain.
But what's so amazing about Emerson, the irony of Emerson, so he writes this thing on self-reliance. He's like the most generous person of all time. Like Whitman doesn't have a career without Emerson, Melville and Hawthorne. And he creates this scene. And the scene is like, he had a rich spouse and he had invested well. He was like this guy, his cup runneth over, and he shared, and he was this. And then I think obviously one of the benefits of art is that although artists tend to be selfish people, is there is something generous about it, right? You're making this thing for other people. You're sharing what you know and what you care about. And there's something, I love the irony of Emerson being this like incredibly generous person with this awesome coaching tree of all these other artists coming off it. And so, it's funny, like we tend to, we look at these philosophies, we look at Stoicism also as this individualistic philosophy of self-mastery. And then what did all of them do? Like they entered politics, where they, like in politics, not in the, I'm going to be the most powerful man in the world politics, but they're like, no, your duty is to serve.
Right.
And you have to participate. You can't withdraw from the world. And to me, that's where that other virtue of Stoicism comes in, the idea of justice. There's this beautiful image in Stoicism. They say, so you're born self-interested. So these are called the circles of Hierocles. So you're born inherently self-interested as a baby. You're just like, gimme, gimme, gimme. And he says, and then, so you care about yourself, then you care about your mom because you can't survive without your mom, then your dad, and then your family. You get these circles that come around you of people and things that you care about. And then ultimately there's the biggest circle, which is just like the future of humanity or animals, plants, the environment. And he basically says that the work of philosophy is to pull the outer rings inwards. And when I was watching your doc, the sort of we-ness or the allness of where philosophy is supposed to get you. And by the way, where religion is also supposed to get you. Like how you treat the least of my brethren is how you treat me. We are attracted to philosophy and religion because we think it'll help us with our problems. So we have these blinders on. We don't see that the fundamental message of all of the schools is to stop caring about yourself and to care about other people. This is also in 12-step, right? It's like you come there because you have a problem. They tell you, we can help you with your problem. And then like, but by the way, you have to accept acknowledge the existence of a higher power, and then you have to start being of service. Like that's the fundamental pivot of all of it. Is like, I can solve your problems by you thinking about your problems less.
Right. Well, you're theoretically supposed to like kind of figure out the deficit.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get through your problems. But then once you're through your problems, there's a whole other structure above that, even in Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like the first two rungs at the bottom are deficits.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you need a roof over your head. You need like a house for protection.
To conquer nature.
And then, but then once you're there, then it's about building on top of that. And like what's interesting about the neuroscience of happiness and what's also crazy about it, because Axel is like breaking new ground. There's a lot that's being done now with fMRIs, like with high Tesla numbers that allow you to really look in real time at what's going on in the brain activity when you with different prompts.
Sure.
And it like his argument, which is really fascinating, is that like the brain evolved with an architecture that points in a very specific direction. Like if these 6 neurotransmitters are, basically the reward system we have in our brain, then all we need to do is follow them.
Yeah.
Instead of just following the cultural mandate of our respective cultures. In America, it's money, success, and, being respected in your field. If it's more just like, it's figuring out which things in your life fill up your 6 buckets.
Sure.
And that if you followed that, then you get there. And of course, those 6 buckets are totally tied to Aristotle's like hedonism and eudaimonia.
Yeah.
But it's like hedonism becomes, hanging out with friends, laughing, enjoying.
It's not orgies and opium.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's exactly. It's like it's much more pedestrian and quotidian. And then on the other, the eudaimonia, which is like your purpose. Yeah. And I think that we overdo purpose. Or we misinterpret it. I'm just talking about myself. Like is my purpose to be a filmmaker? Yeah. Is it to like, am I doing it right? Am I serving? Am I following my passion into like, purpose is great and all, but like you can't just go full on purpose.
I'm thinking about this for a book I'm going to do. So if he's defining happiness as human flourishing, which I think is better, right? Because happiness is a problematic word because we think that's like laughing and having fun or something. But if we take it as human flourishing, then the problem is our Western understanding of flourishing being like very successful, master of your universe, right? But if you take human flourishing more as being like a great, well-rounded human being, like if I told you this person is the greatest ever at what they do, but they have neglected their family, they're a dick to people they pass on the street, you'd be like, that there's a deficiency there that's marring the beauty of the flourishing. Or you could say that's not flourishing because you're so bad in this other area, right? And so if we take a human as being this person who, a certain amount of mastery, but then also a certain amount of positive contributions to humanity, what is their role as a daughter or husband or wife or mother or father? You can't read the Greeks and not hear them really talk a lot about your role and obligations as a citizen, right? Because the city was so much smaller, everyone had to like pitch in a way that now you ask someone what your responsibilities are as a citizen, they're like, well, maybe voting. And by the way, only 50% of us do that. Right. But the idea that you have to, you are obligated to contribute and that's showing up at a city council meeting or picking up a tree that fell across the road, that this is also human flourishing. I think if we see it more as that, as you do in the doc of these different buckets we're filling, that you can't be flourishing if you're woefully deficient in any of the things, then maybe we get it closer to what they meant.
What's funny is that I'm working on a thing about democracy now. Yeah. Like kind of like happiness, but about democracy. And these questions of participation, serving, duty, like service, it's not something like, what is our obligation as citizens? Our country.
I donate money.
Right.
No, they had a much more expansive role of how this thing was going to work. And it's funny, I have a quote in the new book from Pericles where he's saying like, one person's disengagement is only possible by someone else's increased engagement. And so there's also this thing, by not doing your duty, you're actually ceding the field to the people you don't want to be participating. You know what I mean? I don't just mean people who disagree with you, but like if the system is not filled by people who are relatively well-rounded, they've been successful in other ways, they've got a family and they've got this and they've got, what you're doing is you're basically like the most ambitious monsters, fame hungry, like sociopathic individuals. They just fill that space.
There's also, again, with Brazil, there's an interesting comparison because they have mandatory voting. But what's
doesn't seem to have solved anything.
No, well, because mandatory voting, where you have a lot of uneducated electorate and high levels of poverty, like becomes a worse problem. Like,
Yeah.
but we should have mandatory voting.
Yes.
Like, but we also, in order for mandatory voting to work, you need
Otherwise,
education.
you just have a mob that you can
Right.
whip up. Yes.
Right. So you need better education too. Like,
Yes.
you can't have voting and participation without education, and
Yes.
like ideally without moral education, right? Like values,
Yes.
these courage, temperance, justice, like, humility, humanity. Like, these are moral. We don't teach moral education.
No.
Because like
Well, I got a book I'll give you in the store, but the founders were assuming like, hey, we're going to leave you, we're going to not delineate any of these rights, so you can do it or not. But they expected you to have a sort of personal moral code and understanding of what is good and not good for a human to be and to do, to balance out what they're not explicitly codifying in the law. And you're realizing that the American democratic system has all these unwritten norms or expectations that were based on certain cultural values that the right is now trying to say we're all religious, but they weren't. They were based on the classical ideas, which predate, these religious ideas. But the idea was like, they expected you to not do it because it was wrong, not do it because it was legal or illegal. And that was this governing assumption, which is almost certainly not the case anymore. And that's a huge problem.
Right. They assume that just people would be ashamed to act so awfully and
Yes.
like to be so amoral that they would just,
when they expected
break these
ambition to be a check against ambition. So they'd be like, sure, you're going to get a Donald Trump or a whomever every once in a while. But most of the people attracted to it are going to be good. Right.
But even Martin Luther King made that gamble. And Gandhi did too. The whole idea of nonviolent protest was to basically invite, outrageous things to happen to you and use the press almost like the filming of these beatings.
Yeah.
The gamble was that this would outrage the general public and their moral code, and it did.
Yes. Although he writes this thing called If I Were a Czech. And he's like saying that if he lived in the Czech Republic, he was like, this is how I would have resisted Hitler. You read the essay and it makes sense. And then you go, I don't think it would have worked, right? Because like what he was fundamentally appealing to, not that the British are wonderful people and they certainly weren't as a colonial power, but he was appealing to a conscience that was successful in that case. It took, 40 years or it took a very long time, but and a lot of atrocities to get it to finally nail, just as it did in the civil rights movement. But yeah, it only works if the assumption that human beings or cultures are decent is true. And sometimes that's not true because things have gone so far in one direction and then it maybe doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it would work now.
I don't either. I mean, there's this article called "The Cruelty is the Point," and it sort of explains a whole political movement in the United States right now, which is it's not that they don't think that it's bad. It's that they support it because it's bad. They like that it upsets a group of the other.
But that's only because they're so upset.
Yes.
They've already descended into a level of unhappiness that they feel that the only way to elevate themselves is to.
Well, if you feel like you're aggrieved and persecuted, that's how you justify doing it to other people, right? That's the terribleness of that cycle, is that you tell yourself that you're the kicked upon minority who's standing up for yourself, as opposed to being the overwhelming majority who is kicking the shit out of the little guy.
Well, I'm curious. So the third episode in this happiness series is about philosophy, and there is a bunch of stuff there from classical stuff. What did you think? I mean, I'm sure you had some thoughts.
Well, the thing I took, I think you got most of that right, and I enjoyed it. But I was actually you interview Jill, what's her name?
Flipovich.
I love her, and her argument that which I think I'm thinking more about just in my own life, and it is the way that in which our happiness or our fulfillment or flourishing comes at the expense of other people. And so to me, that's a big part of the virtue of justice, is thinking about where we externalize. And there's a joke where like women become like CEOs or leaders, and they go, I realized I needed a wife, like they like they're realizing like, oh, like the men that they're competing with or are working with have this enormous advantage, this sort of structural setup that is designed to encourage them to go out and do things.
By the way, a lot of female executives that I know do, like the man does provide that stuff. Like they are taking the division of labor is reversed.
But it's having to do that and realizing like, oh, okay, there's all these, you illustrate it well with the hierarchy, but we just sort of take these things for granted. Oh, someone's going to take care of this so I can go do this other stuff. And I thought that was really, it's like, you can see this in couples, you can see this in cultures.
Right. I mean, Jill talks more. I mean, she also spoke about the way, marginalized communities are often filling in this role too. Like housekeepers,
The Spartans are this race of great warriors, right? And they don't have time for philosophy or art. They're just the greatest warriors. And we owe our humanity, we owe Western civilization to this resistance at Thermopylae, which is in the movie 300, but they resist, sort of Eastern tyranny. That's what allows, sort of democracy to flourish, all this stuff. But fundamentally, they run a slave-based society where they all train in the arts of war. And there's this race of people called the Helots who do all the farming, all the housework, all the stuff, right? And just thinking about how you look at even the founding of America, right? Like, where are they having time to just think about these ideas? What a culture! Right. How are they How is George Washington just leading an unpaid revolution of troops? It's because somebody at home is manning the plantation.
They're slaves,
yes,
and women, and poor people. Who?
So I think to me it's this ethical, moral, and then logistical question of like, how do you set up a society? How do you run your personal life and then a culture in a way that everyone is allowed to succeed, that doesn't get into the fantasy of Marxism or something.
Denmark.
Yeah, where you're thinking about how do we structure this so there's not somebody whose happiness is dependent on their boot being on somebody else's neck.
Right. Well, there's a total correlation between, obviously income inequality and violence.
Yeah.
Like the more income inequality there is, the angrier people are and the more they're willing to, commit violence to bring those two things closer together. So there's an episode too about Scandinavia.
Oh, interesting.
And Scandinavia is often at the very top of the list of the World Happiness Report. So I was like, that was a natural place for me to
Well, I think
go.
They even go like, oh, okay, like why is America's birth rate so low? And it's like, it's because it's so hard to have kids. It's super hard to have kids. Our whole society is like not set up to have kids. We don't have subsidies or childcare, healthcare. Right. And then you look at these Scandinavian countries and you go, well, they have it all. They have the dream thing. And their fertility rate sucks too. And it's because exactly what Jill is talking about, which is still the cultural assumptions are such that, some people's flourishing is dependent on other people's flourishing. And it's mostly a male-female breakdown.
Scandinavia has this thing called Jante's Law. And Jante's Law is like, don't think you're better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And there's pluses and minuses to that. Like, what's interesting, and this isn't all in the kind of the Denmark episode, which is that, like, there were so many interesting things about Scandinavia that, yes, they have universal healthcare, free education, great maternity, paternity leave that allows men and women to divide the labor of raising children together and allows men to have relationships with their children. So there's all that. But on top of that, like, they don't have the hustle killing it culture.
Yeah.
In fact, like, and I asked a lot of people, they're like, if you work past 5 p.m., people are like, what's wrong with you? Like, can you not get your work done in the hours allotted?
It's very hard to do great work, that way.
And if you're like, the idea of like working over the weekend to get ahead for the next week. They're like, is there something wrong with you? Like, because, and you have like all these scheduled community activities there. Like everyone's in these clubs. There's like the soccer club. There's this club. There's that club. You can't like just pop into a restaurant on a Friday night in Copenhagen. These or Aarhus, which is the other place I went to, like these places are reserved, like people are making reservations. They're planning it out. They're taking a really active role in their social planners. And also like if you're like, there's no blingy, like conspicuous consumption there. It's very frowned upon. So like the idea of getting super rich and then like bragging about it or working really hard and making a big deal about how much you worked over the weekend, like how hard you're hustling, it's like ugly.
Interesting.
It's like that they have a tamponing mechanism to basically keep everyone equal and balanced. Right. And that doesn't necessarily create like massive joy. Yeah. The happiness in Scandinavia is not like exuberant.
They're putting a floor, but also a ceiling on it. Yeah. Yeah. And then it all depends on us paying for the world's defense budget. You know what I mean?
Right. There's no military. Right. So, but the people there do feel, I think the human flourishing is maximized on a policy level. Yeah. Right. Except whereas the beautiful works of art or, the groundbreaking philosophy, like it's a weird, you control for these. No one's got the dials perfect. No. And that's why the world is like, right. You need to look at it in the context of the rest of the world too. Right. Cause other people America certainly has got like, we dialed in a couple of them. Yeah. Really ambition, drive, like progress. Yeah. Unbridled success and progress, but like they're paying 55% income tax, right? Which is super high, but they're getting a lot back. Like if you're super wealthy in the U.S., you're also paying just not getting about 50% income tax, but you ain't getting anything back. I know, it's crazy. So I do think that there are these great lessons we can learn from these other places. For sure. You want to go check out some books? Yeah. All right, let's do it.